So moving on to 805. I have some handouts here. If you can just, if you want to come up, they're handouts with bullet points on why you should be a absolute no on 805, okay? And what they were telling you, okay, those that want this to pass, is that it's for nonviolent offenders, okay? That is not correct. Yes, nonviolent offenders is short, everything short of a murderer, okay? What they don't tell you is that nonviolent offenses are things like crimes against children. Let me read you a few of those. Soliciting sexual conduct with a minor, encouraging a minor to engage in drug crimes, transmission of child pornography, child trafficking, harboring, possession of weapons on school property, okay? That's the crimes against children that are nonviolent. Crimes against animals, also considered nonviolent. Killing or disfiguring a police dog, dog fighting, animal cruelty, larceny of livestock.
Lots going on. What do we say, 4 weeks to the election, 20-some days, 26, 27 days. We've got to pull this and cross the finish line. Pray like you've never prayed before. Talk to your neighbors. Spread the message. Vote straight party. Because here's the thing, folks. It's principle over anything else. If it's not about the personality of the president, it's not about the personality of any of our candidates who are running. It is about the principles of one party that stands for death and another party that stands for life and for liberty. You can have death and tyranny on one side, and you can have life and liberty on the other side. So which set of principles are you going to endorse as an American? I know which one I'm going to endorse. All right, I know that you guys are here to hear from our wonderful Sheriff Vic Regalado, so if, without any further ado, I'm going to bring him up, but I do have a little bit of bump music for him. There's a little, have you heard he's done a campaign ad for somebody? So I'm going to play that, and Vic, why don't you come on up, and we'll...
Liberals cry to defund the police. But who stands between rioters and more destruction? Law enforcement. We always have your back. There's an Oklahoman in the U.S. Senate who has always had our back. And now, as he's being attacked by socialists who want to destroy our country and state, law enforcement will always have Jim Inhofe's back. Always.
I'm Jim Inhofe, and I approve this message.
I love Jim's commercials. He's always got the best background music and production and all those good things. I've known the Inhofe family for many years, and it was a pleasure to do that. And I'll tell you, the funny thing about this, and funny, to me it's funny, I got a lot, not a lot, but a handful of hate emails after I did this commercial. And I will say one thing about the left, is that they are all on the same page. Every email was, I mean, it was the same one after another, and they were from different people, because sometimes you get those automated ones and they send a general message out, but right? These were all different people, but it was always the same thing. And I wondered, based on their emails, what commercial they watched. Because it basically said, we are terrified of you now. And we're scared that your deputies would pull us over because we're not Republican, or we may have socialist or liberal views. I watched the commercial, I was in it, and I don't remember it saying that. And then each one followed with, you no longer have our vote, which I don't think I had anyway, right? But I will tell you, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And before I go on with my speech, I would tell you a Tulsa World endorsement. So I ran 4 elections at the beginning, if you guys remember that, right? They didn't endorse me in the first 2. Then they endorsed me on the 3rd one, and I got a flood of calls going, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing being endorsed by Tulsa World? You know, so it's not it's not a bad thing, right? So I want to talk a lot about a lot of things, but first I want to do some informational stuff first. For those of you that were at the city elders meeting this morning, you're going to hear a little bit of the same, right? But I want to make sure that you guys understand what's going on with current event stuff, right? And then we're going to talk about the state of policing and criminal justice reform in today's world, okay? So first and foremost, let's start off with, let's get this one out of the way. How many of you are aware of the McGirt decision handed down by the SCOTUS, right? Okay, so I want to touch on that a little bit because there seems to be a lot of confusion within law enforcement, and so I can only imagine with our citizens. Essentially what it says is that the Tulsa County area is Creek Nation land, right? And that if a crime occurs on sovereign land and it involves a tribal member as a victim and or a suspect or both, okay, that it falls, depending on the crime, it falls within the jurisdiction of the Creek Nation and or the federal government, okay? The U.S. Attorney's Office. And typically the U.S. Attorney's Office will, or the FBI will investigate it if it's under the Major Crimes Act, which simply put is rape, murder, and all the bad stuff, right? Everything else can go to the tribes to investigate and prosecute. So, you know, there's been confusion, obviously, on how we determine whether you are tribal or not. What I found out early on is that probably one of the most fraudulent pieces of document out there are tribal cards. So now we have to call the tribe and ensure that they're on the rolls. And then we have to cross-commission our deputies, our law enforcement here in Tulsa with the tribes so that we can respond to crimes in progress or make arrests or investigations of individuals who may be tribal. So really that's kind of it in a nutshell. I can go on and on, but I think it'd bore you. But I want to make sure that you have an understanding, more importantly, about the Pandora's box that this opens up, okay? So this started off as a criminal justice issue for the Creek Nation here in Tulsa County. Now we have the Cherokees, okay, have followed suit. That will be determined by the SCOTUS here before long, and whether or not they are a sovereign nation within Oklahoma. I believe that the answer will be the same as McGirt. Why wouldn't it be? And then each tribe will follow suit, okay? Now, from a criminal justice standpoint, we're dealing with it effectively. We've partnered with the U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, and of course our colleagues at Tulsa PD. But what it does open the door to is the land, where you live, okay? And before, when we first started talking about that, we thought, well, that's crazy. It's not, folks. I mean, for the title companies especially, it may be an absolute nightmare, okay? Mineral rights, land rights, things like that are going to come into question. You know, so we really have to pay attention to this stuff. And the bad part about that is that nobody has a clear-cut answer as to the direction in which we're going to go. Congress is the only ones that can fix this problem because it involves sovereign nations, right? Congress work very fast? No. And I would tell you from a political standpoint, I'd love to see who has the gumption to say, we're going to take that land back. That's what you got to think about for a second, right? So those are things that we've been dealing with among a litany of things in law enforcement and specifically here in Tulsa County. And let me tell you some of the ramifications of this, okay? Individuals who have been arrested for murder that occurred on tribal land are having their cases dropped. Dropped, folks. On some occasions, they're being retried, but let me tell you how difficult it is to even try a murder case when it's fresh. Okay, so now you talk 19 years later in some of these cases, trying to find witnesses and things like that. That's not going to happen, to put it plain and simple. So now we've got murderers, okay, that are going to get their sentences either reduced or vacated. And that's just murderers. Think of everybody else, because this is retro now, okay? And I'll tell you that as a former homicide detective with Tulsa PD, I investigated over 200 of those murders. And many of those that are up in question were ones I investigated. And these were extremely dangerous individuals. So these are the things that we're looking at. You know, it's another 2020 nightmare. And I don't have an answer for you as to where we're going to go with this, or if it's going to be something that we're going to have to live with and adjust to for years to come. And I'll answer questions here in a moment. But I wanted to make sure that you were caught up with that and what that means. And the other thing that you should take into account is that if you are tribal and you have that tag on the back of your car, do you think you become an automatic target for individuals who say, hey, if I commit an act of violence against you, it may be tribal or it may be the U.S. Attorney's Office or the feds that come and investigate that, right? But it won't be the local PD or the county. I think you become a target, right? So, you know, there's a lot of splinter things, and I don't think we've even touched the tip of the iceberg on the other issues that are going to arise from this decision. I hope that somebody somewhere out there is formulating an answer to this and a solution, because if not, I'm not a fearmonger, and I'm usually a very positive person, but I'm worried as to where they'll go with this. Okay? Quickly, any questions? Yes, sir.
Is this worth pursuing? Would there be any hope that the tribes might waive some of their sovereignty over cases already adjudicated?
So there has been talk about that, because let's be honest, the tribes are not capable of, and nor is the federal government, just so you'll know, in handling the amount of violent crime. We'll just limit it to violent crime that occurs in Tulsa County. And that's a terrible thing to say, but the fact is, right? The district attorney's office, and you'll have a new appreciation for what they've done, is that they try, you know, there's 70 on average, 70 to 80 murders in Tulsa County. So you can see the amount of cases that make their way through the district attorney's office. The U.S. Attorney's Office, okay, by and large, do not prosecute murders until now. And admittedly, many of them have never prosecuted a murder. And so they're having to start from step point A and make their way to point Z very quickly so that they can effectively prosecute a murder trial. And I tell you, that's very difficult. It takes a lot of experience and know-how and all those things. And they're very talented, but they just don't prosecute those type of cases historically. So there's a lot of issues for all of us to consider, and I want to make sure that you're informed as best as possible, and it's ever-changing. I can't spend the rest of the time going into the other details, but I want you to have the important ones so that when you see these things arise, you kind of have an idea of what is happening right here in Oklahoma. Somebody had their hand raised. Yes.
Sheriff, my concern is this. I'm not an Indian, okay? If I am the victim of a relatively small crime, or I'm the perpetrator of a small crime, and I end up in tribal court, how are my civil rights going to be protected?
So provided that you have either victimized somebody who is tribal, right, that does end up over there, you will be afforded an attorney like anything else. The constitutional rights will still come into play, right? So you'll be taken care of. But I would tell you this: do you know that anybody want to take a guess at what the maximum sentence is for a crime, including murder, is with the Creek Nation? 3 years. Now, murders would go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the feds would investigate that. But that's a fact. And let's be honest, murder, although the top of the mountain, right, in terms of violent crime, there's so many other crimes like burglaries and things like that, and property damage and violation of protective orders, okay? Now, there is a component with the federal government to deal with violation of protective orders, but let's be honest, the majority of violation of protective orders come from people who you have a protective order against, and they drive by or they harass you with phone calls and things like that, right? They're not going to be able to handle that. That's probably going to go to the tribes to handle. So now you're going to Okmulgee, right? And I think that we're working on getting an office up here so that we don't have to go to Okmulgee to handle those crimes. But the fact is, that's slow moving. And are there going to be people who get lost in the shuffle? Absolutely. And many of you or some of you who were at the city elders meeting this morning heard from our district attorney about those very issues. Right? So it's very concerning to law enforcement in regards to how that's going to play out. I can only tell you at this point, I'm hoping, right, that something happens and that there's an agreement that hopefully we can, from a criminal justice standpoint, that we can go back to the way it was for the betterment of both the tribes as well as the state of Oklahoma. That doesn't happen, and then I don't know what, right? But again, I take into consideration, this opens Pandora's box to a litany of things that surpass the criminal justice system, right? You know, so pay attention, and hopefully more information will be forthcoming, and when it does, I'd certainly be happy to come back and talk additionally about the McGirt issue. So moving forward, unless you have questions?
Is that in all states that have Indians?
Right now, it's limited to Oklahoma. Now, I would think that potentially other tribes around the country may follow suit. Now, these are limited to the civilized tribes at this point in time, and I am not well versed enough in Indian law or things of those matters to whether or not there's 467. Last count I heard 467 recognized tribes, right? I don't know how they fit in terms of land treaties and things like that occurred way before any of our times. So I don't know.
Do you have your aspirin handy? The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says that no state shall deny any of their constituents the equal protection of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, there's one to deal with.
Yeah, there's a lot to deal with on this one. But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that you were informed. This is all relatively new stuff, and so we're trying to disseminate that information out as best we can so that you are informed as our citizens, right? So moving on to 805. I have some handouts here. If you want to come up, they're handouts with bullet points on why you should be a absolute no on 805, okay? And feel free to take those, copy them, whatever it is. That's for you to look at and disseminate as you see fit. So one of the things I want to address, most of you are familiar with 805 and what that question is. Anybody not? Because I can explain it. 805, okay. Essentially what it says is that repeat offenders cannot be held accountable for multiple offenses. So if you commit a crime, okay, and you've committed felonies before, that cannot be held against you, nor can the repeated crimes should you continue to commit them, okay? You're always a first-time offense, okay? And then that's the simplest way to put it is you're always a first-time offender, okay? And what they were telling you, okay, those that want this to pass, is that it's for nonviolent offenders, okay? That is not correct. Yes, nonviolent offenders is everything short of a murderer, okay? What they don't tell you is that nonviolent offenses are things like crimes against children. Let me read you a few of those. Soliciting sexual conduct with a minor, encouraging a minor to engage in drug crimes, transmission of child pornography, child trafficking, harboring, possession of weapons on school property, okay? That's the crimes against children that are nonviolent. Crimes against animals, also considered nonviolent. Killing or disfiguring a police dog, dog fighting, animal cruelty, larceny of livestock. I had mentioned earlier today that there was a story in the news the other day about Oklahoma leading the country in animal cruelty cases. So I find it kind of ironic that we are going to say it's nonviolent and turn our backs on that. Public safety issues, second-degree burglary, arson, identity theft, DUI causing great bodily injury. And here's one that I think you're going to find extremely ironic. Hate crimes based on race and or religion. Isn't that something? Nonviolent. Yeah. Negligent homicide and indecent exposure. Now here's the biggie. Domestic violence, okay? Domestic violence, abuse in the presence of a child, domestic violence by strangulation, stalking, violating a final protective order. Now, recently the governor signed in and amended some of those domestic abuse acts as violent crimes. The problem is that 805 says it goes back to January 1 of 2020, and whatever crimes were deemed nonviolent on that day moving forward are falling under 805. So if you are in prison serving time for any of these, it's mandatory sentence reduction or vacating your sentence. Okay, and these are sentences that were handed out by a jury of that individual's peers. It was vetted by a court of law, and now it's going to be yanked back based on 805. That's serious, guys, right? Very serious. And so what I would tell you, that's right, yeah, it's absolutely. And what I would tell you is that proponents for it, let me get right here, continually are pounding that it is for drug, property, and nonviolent crimes. That's what they're pounding out there, right? And the same individuals and same organizations right here in Oklahoma who are supporting 805 also pushed 780 and 81. You remember that little gem, okay? Which basically said misdemeanorized all felony drug crimes, and with the premise that on 781 that the money saved from jail reduction in population would be redirected to the counties for drug and mental health treatment and facilities, okay? This morning I talked about a story I saw last night, and it was about a family whose daughter had been in our jail because of some crime she committed as a result of many years of addiction, substance abuse addiction, drugs, right? And that the only reprieve was when she was in jail. And when they came to pick her up, that was the first time that they had realized or had seen their real daughter in quite some time. Folks, that one, I want to tell you what that points out, is that our jail is the main source of mental health and substance abuse treatment. That is inherently wrong, okay? And yet no one has called out. I've been calling it out since 2017. Steve Kunzweiler has. I've come out and said, you lied to the people about 780 and 81. And if I was wrong, folks, you think they wouldn't come at me in a hot New York second and say that sheriff's full of it? I'm waiting, because it hasn't happened. And these are the same folks telling you that 805 is going to help with criminal justice reform and things like that. And I love that phrase right there, those two words, criminal justice reform, 3 words, sorry. And we're going to talk about that here in a second, okay? Because everybody likes to put, oh, it's criminal justice reform. It sounds really sexy, okay? But you got to get into the details. The devil lives there, right? And so 805, folks, and I had several people come up to me this morning going, wow, I didn't realize I was actually going to vote for that. And I understand, if you see the commercial, it says at the end of it, law enforcement and judges support this. I've publicly said, in fact, I did 3 interviews on 805 today. Show me which ones. Show me. I know there's one former TPD chief on there, Drew Diamond, okay, but Drew is so far to the left, I can't see him anymore. And he's, and I've known him for a while, but that's what he does over the last, he hadn't been chief since 1985. I mean, you know, so, but I want to know where these law enforcement people who support this, they're not there, folks. That commercial is from outside resources, which most of these are, okay? Because at the end of the day, here's the truest fact, and I'll leave you with this, is that if this passes, okay, you're not going to see the effects of it tomorrow or even in a year. In 4 years, you're going to wake up and go, whoa, wait a minute. How come this individual who has broken into my house 4 times not in prison? And then you're going to go, you're going to have forgotten about 805, and you're going to go, the police aren't doing their jobs. The criminal courts aren't doing their jobs. And we're going to point right back to the day this passed. And the people that supported it, guess what? They don't live where we live. They live somewhere else where they don't have to worry about it. They have the financial means for private security. They have the gated communities. right? It's the people that can't defend themselves that law enforcement has long protected, and now it ties our hands. The only people that suffer are you. We can't have that. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care what you do. I don't care who your friends are. But tell them that 805 is bad for everyone. There is no reform in that. It's a change in the way we do business. Any questions on that?
Do we know who's behind this?
Chris Steele.
Chris Steele.
He was with the Oklahoma Citizens for Criminal Justice Reform. He's the one that spearheaded 780 and 81. He's a coward. I've debated him twice. We've talked about, and I flat out said, you lied. Nobody. He just sits there and goes, that's not true. That's not an argument. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Is this a constitutional amendment?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So, yeah, that's very important. Thank you. So, folks, this is a change to the Constitution, which means this, that when it happens, and the multitude of problems that are going to arise out of this, your lawmakers, your policymakers, your legislators aren't going to be able to do anything about it. The only way you can change it back is through a vote of the people. And that's extremely, extremely time intensive and extremely difficult to do. That's why they're going after a change in the Constitution, right? They're not dumb people. They just don't care about your well-being. And that's a fact.
That's probably why we have so many early voting ballots coming in, because they want to make sure this passes.
Yeah. Oh, it's a full-on charge on this thing. I mean, it really is. It reminds me of 780 and 81. They pushed it and said we're going to provide you. They looked you in the eye and said, we're going to provide you with substance abuse treatment and facilities and mental health. And those are things that we've all, right? We know somebody who suffers from one of those, all right? Or we have friends who have gone through that. And what a terrible thing to take advantage of, people's misery from addiction and mental health issues, and use that for an agenda. And it's still not there, folks. You ask, and this is what I tell you, don't just believe your sheriff, right? Vet everything, question. That's always my message, question. Go to your substance abuse clinics and doctors if you know them and say, hey, that old sheriff, here's what he told us. What's your thoughts? They're gonna tell you the same exact thing. Yeah, that's the issue, is we have nowhere to take you if you're suffering from mental illness and or substance abuse, right? So, folks, it's a resounding no on this. Tell everybody you know it's got to be a no on this. And I've got no skin in the game, right? Law enforcement doesn't, other than the fact that we are here to protect your interests as it relates to the law and the enforcement of it. Other than that, I don't get paid. Nobody's, saying, hey, Sheriff Regalado, get up there and we'll give you a couple bucks and a coffee maker. No. I'm telling you this because it's my job. It's what you elected me for. Is to keep you informed of these issues, the facts, folks. And this is what I tell people. I'm not telling you that how to vote. That's a freedom that is personal to you. What I want you to do is go to that ballot box with all the information so that you can make an informed choice. If you do that, I know it's going to be no.
And now you have musical accompaniment to go with it.
I thought I had another commercial up there. So, let's talk about the state of criminal justice reform and law enforcement in today's world. What a difficult time. It is an all-out attack on law enforcement and freedom. I think David mentioned our freedom is at stake. And let me tell you, now more than ever, it's at stake. Okay? And this is what I say, ask yourself, are you free? If you hesitate, you're not free. If it's not a, yes, I am free, you're not free, folks. And think about this for a second, okay? Across this country, we're seeing people being told when they can worship, when they can't worship, okay? We're being told that you can't defend yourself under the Second Amendment. Okay? You can't speak out on certain issues without being attacked. And I know, trust me.
Or losing your job.
Or losing your job, or being looked at as and the race baiters, okay? You can't. So are you free? Right? No, you're not. And it will get worse unless we take a stand and unify under that. You know, whether you're a far right, moderate, I don't really care at the end of the day. Unite as an American and a free American. We'll sort our differences out later, but our freedoms, we should all be very worried at this point in time because of the rhetoric that's out there. Okay? And I want to tell you, we really felt censorship in the last couple days, and I didn't get to mention this morning, but I want to tell you what happened. So we paid for a recruiting video to be done for the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, and they did a fine job on it, okay? And you can look it up on YouTube. It's pretty cool. If you're a young man or woman, it gets you the blood going, right? And essentially all it shows is the different jobs within the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. Everything from dispatching, our civilian jobs, our SWAT, our patrol, our jail detention staff, all the things that make the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, right? And all the job opportunities that are available. And it's set to some music, no copyright issues, right? All above board. It was professionally done. We paid for it. Good stuff, right? We want people to see it because we want you to come and fill our job vacancies. We got jobs for you, right? So we got on Facebook and we paid for it to be boosted. Everybody know what that means? Okay? Denied. And initially, oh, it gets better. Initially, they sent the standard, been rejected, possibly due to social issues, political, and/or elections. Well, it's got to be a mistake because it doesn't fit any of those, okay? So as we continue to dig, and this is why I didn't mention this morning because I was waiting for the answer. We finally got our answer. Guess what? Law enforcement is considered political now. Oh my gosh. Folks, that ain't no lie. That's what we're told. Law enforcement is political.
By Facebook?
By Facebook, absolutely. Oh, Twitter's always been a haterade area for everybody. And, but folks, if they are going to censor law enforcement, what do you think they're going to do to you? What do you think they're already doing to you? Right? And here's where I tell you, and I kind of get on my soapbox here. This happened because big tech was allowed, okay, to get in an amendment, a law, I forgot what it's called, where they can't be sued for anything in regards to freedom of speech and things of that nature. That wasn't Democrats only, it was Republicans. And so here's where I tell you that you have to hold your elected officials accountable, because simply staying silent doesn't make you innocent. In fact, I think it makes you culpable. If you're not going to stand up and speak about the issues that are going on in terms of our freedom and our rights, then I got nothing to do with you. Because it is going to take brave men and women to speak out. And you felt that, right? A swastika, it's, how sickening. Okay, but that's the things that you get. So I want to show you something else along those lines. Talking about my friends at the Tulsa World. That commercial got me in the Tulsa World 4 times. 4 times. I'm like, I thought it was a pretty cool commercial, right? 4 times, and it was all negative. The sheriff was illegally wore his uniform. No, I didn't. And here's the funny thing about that. I addressed that after the Trump rally. Some of you guys were there. I wore my uniform, and they called almost the next day, hey, were you allowed to wear your uniform? Yes. Under the Hatch Act, I can wear my uniform. But I also passed it through the district attorney. I dotted my I's, crossed my T's. You know, I wasn't born yesterday. And I know that you guys will jump at the chance to make me look foolish at any given time. So yes. Okay, and away we went. There was no, okay, whatever. There wasn't even an article about that. Well, fast forward to the Inhofe commercial, all of a sudden, oh, well, hey, we got questions about the sheriff wearing his uniform. We already addressed that, but they put it out because, boy, it flamed. As soon as I hit the Tulsa World, that's when the emails started coming. You should be investigated. You should be this. You should be that. Amazing. And I know it had to be a really good commercial when I get hate mail over it. But my point is, and I want to get to it, I want to pass this around. I want you to take a good look at this before I even talk about this. I'm going to pass it around, a couple of tables. If you have seen it already, give it to somebody who hasn't, because this might be the most disgusting political cartoon I've ever seen in my life. Oh, yeah. Okay? I don't either. I didn't know it was in there until some friends said, you've got to look at this disgusting cartoon. And it really was. And I want to give you a chance to digest that for a second. Yes, and that was pointed out to me this morning by Steve. Isn't that something? The hypocrisy is deep.
I've been calling them about that for years.
Yeah.
But it doesn't embarrass them, they just keep on doing it.
Oh, no, they have no shame.
They have no shame at all.
So what you're looking at is Lady Justice toppled over. You see a caption that says, if you want equal protection under the law, something to that effect, then be a cop. And it shows a young African-American child standing there with an astonished look on his face. And then the paperwork around Lady Justice is all the names of them individuals that were either shot or killed by police, okay? Have you seen a more divisive thing than that? Yet you will hear these people talk about being afraid of being pulled over by law enforcement if they got an Abby Broyles sticker on the back of their bumper. But there's no outrage about that cartoon. And I realized, to be fair, that cartoon was done by an individual out of Boston, right? That's not a surprise. But it was put in our paper here. And I know very few people read it, but the fact is, those that do, it fuels their fire, and it fuels the hatred in them and the divisiveness. And we were talking about, yes?
So, Sheriff, after we had 2 Tulsa PD officers shot, they have the audacity to run that.
Absolutely.
It's unconscionable.
It is. I'm shocked by very little in this world. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot, unfortunately. My skin has been thickened over the years. But that is unconscionable. It is. It's divisive. It's race baiting. And it's just sad to put a small child right there. So let's talk about the implications of things like that. And that, let's be honest, that's just one piece of negative rhetoric, right? And we've talked about rights that are being, that are under attack. Folks, due process is under attack. In fact, it's so under attack that I think they're winning. We have police officers, okay, and I say police officers because right now that's the focus of this. But I want you, it's like Pandora's box. So you have to look and think 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. And right now, okay, a police officer is guilty until proven innocent. And the bad thing about it is, okay, is that, and I'm going to give you an example. If it's an African American that gets shot, we're guilty. If it's anybody else, they don't even care. And I'm talking about the media. And I'll tell you a prime example, okay? There was, when we had the protest downtown, we had an officer-involved shooting, okay? And myself and many others in law enforcement went, oh my gosh, we don't, you know, this is horrible. Let's get down there, let's figure out what happened, okay? Well, who else thought about that? Local media. And boy, they were down there, so fast, make your head spin. Till they found out I was a white guy. And just as quickly as I got there, they just as quickly left. Nobody heard about that shooting. Nobody heard about it. I think it was a blurb the next day. Okay? And let me tell you this. All lives matter. Okay? They do. All lives. And why that has become such a bad thing to say, I don't understand it. I really do. I can't wrap my head around it. All lives matter. The law, right, should be enforced without due regard, without even a thought of what you look like or who you are or your wealth or your lack of wealth. And do we have room to get better in law enforcement? Absolutely, folks. I'm not telling you we're perfect, and we're all for criminal justice reform, provided that it's done in a manner that is dealing with facts, that is dealing with ensuring that it serves the people that we serve. You, okay? And that's a fact. We are the most, law enforcement is the most transparent entity in this country. Let me tell you why. Do doctors wear body cams? No. Do doctors have citizen oversight boards going, hey, doc, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to tell you, I think that heart transplant you did was a little off. Why do we have that? Why is that necessary? It's not. And the big push for the body cams was that now we can see what you're doing. So we took them, we got them on there, and now everybody loves them because now our citizens' complaints went, phew. We have evidence now to present in court. We have things that we can train on, and we can hold our deputies and our officers accountable. And we've done that. We get a complaint, we immediately go to that camera, and we get a picture, right? Not a whole story, because cameras don't tell the whole story. I always kind of like to talk about this for a second and point this out. Anybody still watch the NFL? I don't, but I will remember the days when we did watch it. And a guy would catch a touchdown and didn't know if his foot was in bounds or not. And they have the most high-tech cameras, and they huddle around and they get to talk about it, and they get to review the footage and minute little images to make, and it usually took about, right, enough time for me to go grab an adult beverage, come back, 5 minutes, right? To get the decision right. We get this much time. In an uncertain situation, an uncertain environment, and yet you will hear the whole reform. We've got to see what the police are doing. Folks, we don't care. You want to come see, come see. We offer ride-alongs all the time. We got video footage. We have the media that has an open records request for all our videos. We have, you name it, any group that is out there for criminal justice reform, they've got a standing order for all our videos. Wow. Okay. And you don't hear anything. So they go over those videos looking for that one thing, right? Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Yeah, we will. But due process should always be afforded, because if it's not being granted to cops, folks, it won't be long until you're not getting it. And mob rule, okay, folks, when you unleash the mob for a certain thing, you messed up, because the mob doesn't care after a while. They forget what they were even committing acts of violence on. And it's happened now. I find it hilarious when you have these crazy liberal mayors around this country who've allowed this, and then they're like, oh my God, why were they attacking me? Because the mob doesn't think about that. We got to find a way, okay, to get past the rhetoric. We've got to find a way to unite as Americans, okay? Despite our differences, and we're gonna have differences, right? And I will say this about one of the emails, hate mails I got, and I have the utmost respect for this individual, whoever, well, I don't know him, But they simply said, listen, I did not like the content of your commercial, but you have the right to support and or vote for anyone. But I just wanted to let you know, as a citizen, that I didn't like it. Thank you, sir, and have a good day.
Wow.
That one impacted me the most. I was like, this guy sounds really nice. I want to call him and be like, come on over to my side, you know? Yeah, but that's how you do it. And we can get there. But it's going to be a long fight, guys. It really is. And we're going to have to be united. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that for true change, we need to start getting to our young people. If you don't, we've lost some generations. And they want to learn. I had a conversation with somebody over here just a minute ago. I talk to kids all the time. I say kids, typically teenagers, right? And most of them will start off with the things that they see on social media. So, what are you doing about racist cops? Fair enough. So I answer. But then I redirect them with facts, okay? I don't try to persuade them. I don't try to say, hey, look, crazy. But I try to tell them I want you to be informed. And when 100%, folks, this is no lie, 100% of the time, the kids, you see the lights. You know how kids are. The lights go, boop. Well, where's that at? Where can I find that at? And I tell them, and they're like, wow, okay. And you see them leaving with at least a different perspective. And that's all I think we can ask, is that you are taught both ways, right? Different forms of thinking. My wife's a teacher, and one of the most impactful things she said is that as a student, if you know your teacher's political affiliation, that ain't a very good teacher. And I thought about that for a second, and I went, wow, isn't that something? Right? Because I'm not saying don't teach this or don't teach that, but teach evenly so that you allow our young people to think. And I'm telling you, because I'm one of those kids, hated law enforcement growing up. Right? But impactful people in my life, teachers, coaches, individuals, friends, family, said, hey, open your mind, right, and think. And when I did that, it was like, wow, I know where I'm at. I know what I should believe. And it's not hard. It really isn't. But if we don't start approaching them and teaching them and opening their eyes, folks, right now it's bad. It's going to be treacherous in years to come if we don't start doing that. So anyway, I'm going to open up to questions and everything. Yes, sir. Sorry.
One of the things is that you don't have, you brought up about your rights, is that you really don't have the right to defend yourself, or defend your own home, especially if you live in the state of Missouri.
That's right. That's right. That's why district attorneys' races are incredibly important. Okay? Believe it or not, your city council races are extremely important because we're losing cities. You know, counties typically stay pretty to the right, right? Cities we're losing them for some odd reason. And those I tell you, those are the ones that are important. Believe it. Those local city council races, whew, some of the nuts that are on ours right now is amazing. And there's some good people on there. There really are. Right? But they gotta, you know, they gotta have the backing. They gotta have the support. Because you're on an island as an elected official when you start getting bombed. I have to remind myself this is not the viewpoint of the whole. But I'm human, so when I get the hate mail, because I like to be I love people. I love serving them. And I like for them to like me. And so when I get those hate mails, I'm like, oh, wow. Part of me is like, geez, I bet if I could just talk to them, they'd be friends. But then I got to remind myself, that's silliness, right? So anyway,
Sheriff, what are we seeing here in the Tulsa community, in the Tulsa County area, with regard to the whole defunding law enforcement? Are we seeing a lot of those movements as overtly here as we are in other communities around the country?
Not as bad. You know, Tulsa, and I want to say this, Tulsa's unique in that we have always managed to get through some very difficult times, you know. One of the most difficult times was the Good Friday murders, if you remember that. And boy, I was such a shining moment under some horrific circumstances, but it was shining in the fact that you had all the communities coming together, supporting and helping law enforcement achieve justice for the individuals that were shot and killed during that. And that was my case. And I know it intimately, and I can tell you that I saw the best that we have in Tulsa. And I've seen that, and we've been able to withstand that. We had the huge protest, by and large, other than the silliness that occurred on Brookside. It wasn't as bad. But I see it doing this. If we're not careful, it'll catch us, you know? And that's why we have to remain vigilant and have our open dialogue and discuss these issues and get them in the forefront before the anger, those who want to remain angry, you know, start spreading that vile anger to everybody else. Because then that's when we got a problem.
Peggy's got a question. Let me go over here to her.
I don't have a question. This is just me. A group of us made a couple of trips to Tulsa County board meetings in 2019 because Karen Keith encouraged illegals to come out and start demanding an end to the 287G program, which is the program that's run by the Sheriff's Department where they identify people that are charged with crimes who are illegally in the country, and they work with ICE agents and other immigration enforcement people. And she spearheaded this quietly, but she had a very organized group. They all came in with their black T-shirts with their little logos on them. And we got wind of what was going on, and we filled the room with people dressed in red, white, and blue shirts. Twice, I think. Mm-hmm. Okay? It does happen. And they will be back. And they are very well organized. And they are funded probably from outside Tulsa. And there are some people in Tulsa funding them, too, some very wealthy people. So...
Vote for Josh Turley.
Vote for... Yeah! This is one of the main reasons why we really do need to defeat her, because she pushes these very liberal groups in. Okay? It's kind of sneaky.
So to touch on that a little bit, because it speaks to the power of the group, of the whole. Okay? What you don't know is that I spent the last 3.5 years defending that program, and I went into some very hostile talks. But I stood strong, and the reason I stood strong because it's right. Okay? And then it culminated with that where everybody showed up and showed support of that. And what did that do? You had commissioners up there going, might want to vote right on this one, right? But that's where it worked, okay? And I hear very little about it anymore, you know? You got to remain vigilant. You can never become complacent.
Okay, I also want to tell you, I probably shouldn't do this, but. Chris, okay, I've been around Tulsa 912 since the beginning. You guys know, I've been here forever. But I have to tell you this little vignette because it's one of the funniest things I ever saw. Back in the early 2010s, we were working with Oklahoma 2A to run a discharge petition at the state legislature to get constitutional carry passed. And so we were going around and we were visiting every legislator trying to get them to sign off on this discharge petition, which would force it to the floor for a vote. Because we had a lady from Tulsa who was blocking it, okay? Rhonda, the Speaker of the House at that time was Chris Steele. Now, this is the same guy that's pushing 805. And he was Speaker of the House of Representatives in Oklahoma at that time. And Rhonda cornered him in the hallway of the House offices. And she got right up in his face. And she started doing this. Are you going to sign our discharge petition? Do you support a citizen's right to carry? Blah, blah, blah. That man stood there and he shook, and the sweat just poured from his face. And us other old ladies and men, we just kind of surrounded him and we kind of watched, you know. But I have never seen a politician shake and sweat as much as Chris Steele did that day. He was absolutely scared out of his wits, and he called the highway patrol in to help him.
Because we know Rhonda's that intimidating, right?
What are you anticipating for the Juneteenth and the celebration next year for the 100th year anniversary of the riots, massacre?
Well, I think that, you know, I hope that it's a peaceful. I think it does need to be recognized. We can never, you know, turn our backs or forget atrocities like that, okay? Because if we do, then, you know, it could happen again, right? We don't want to do that. And yes, we didn't do it, but it doesn't mean that we should forget it. You know, so let me be clear on that, is that we should never forget that. And I think it is a part of our history, and a terrible part of our history. But there's a lot of terrible, and that's what makes us unique in this world, this country, is that we can rebound from these things and we can get better. You know, the left would tell you that our forefathers were slave owners and they were inherently evil. And so anything that they did or said should be erased. That's not true. And it may be true that they were slave owners, and it may even be true that maybe they weren't the best of people. It doesn't matter, because the document that they created is a perfect document, right? And it's one that built a country. And I'm going to leave you with this last thought because I think it's so relevant to that question in this discussion. Oklahoma's a red state. And typically we're made out to be, oh, you know, you're white supremacist, you're Hicks, you're racist. I want to point out something. The two largest counties in the state of Oklahoma are Tulsa and Oklahoma County. And the city of Tulsa, of course. Your county sheriff, me, is a Mexican American. Your chief of police is an African American. Oklahoma County is getting ready to have their sheriff's vote, and the Republican and the Democrat are both African Americans. Who's leading the way, folks? Right? And I would tell you that your chief and myself that's last on our list to say, hey, well, look, you know, celebrate me because I'm the first this and the first that. And I've heard Chief Franklin, who's a friend of mine, say this, and I absolutely agree, and I've said the same thing, is it's wonderful, we're proud of that fact, but history will judge us on what we did, not who we were. And I'd much rather years from now you go, you know, that Sheriff Regalado wasn't a bad fella. He did some really good things. As opposed to, he was the first Hispanic sheriff, but God, he sucked. Right? And he feels the same way. And I suspect, I don't know the Democrat over there, but the Republican would tell you the same thing. And I just gave an interview about, and this is, I'm always going to leave you with one last thought, so kick me out of here when I get talking. But it's so important. It's so important because it counters the whole idea that we're racist or that law enforcement is systemic racist. Okay, is that I gave this interview yesterday. We're getting ready to have a job fair at a predominantly African-American church this Sunday and a Hispanic church. And it's a job fair to provide and help with applications and for those that are interested in going into law enforcement. Okay, and since I've taken office, and what I told in this interview, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. So when I was asked, the reporter said, well, so are you trying to hire minorities? And I said, well, we're trying to hire the best people. And you know what? I'll tell you what, I'm going to give kudos to this reporter because they aired this. And I said, it's an insult to say, hey, I hired you because you have brown skin or black skin, right? That's an insult because you're giving me something that I didn't deserve maybe. What I tell our HR is that you hire the best person regardless of skin color, religion, right? Yeah, great stuff, right? Now, here's the amazing fact. is that all people, we just want an equal playing field. That's it, no more, no less. In 4 years, our African-American employees have increased by 30%, our Hispanic by 200%, and we even have some Pacific Islanders, right? I don't know where they came from, but they're here. And they're amazing employees. People just want an equal playing field, that's it. And when we can provide that, right, we're winning. So don't believe the rhetoric, folks. Don't believe it. It's not systemic. Is there racism? Absolutely. There always will be. Right? On all sides. And there's always going to be people who don't like you. Doesn't matter. And there's always going to be people who don't like law enforcement. And that's okay. But we don't have to tear up. We don't have to fight. We don't have to kill. We can agree to disagree. How's that? Folks, it's been an honor again. I'll take no more questions now, and I promise not to leave you with another last thing.
Troy, hold on. Let me get Troy first.
Is your office anticipating and gearing up for any disruption between November and January?
Absolutely. We always want to prepare. We hope, right? But we want to be prepared. We don't want to get flat-footed. So we have things in place, especially at our election boards and various other sites. In the event something like that should happen. So rest assured, we have been planning for that day for quite some time.
Jim, one more question here.
I have a short comment to make on this. I think a lot of the problems we have are because we have allowed people to be in charge of situations just based on rhetoric or race or guilt or things like that. So much of success or failure depends on who's in charge. And I personally would like to say I am thrilled to have you in charge of our sheriff's
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Let's
you.
give him a round of applause. Sheriff Regalado, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate all that you do.
I have one last thing. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, one last thing. We're calling you the one last thing, sure.
I have the one last thing. Folks, thank you.
Everybody, thanks for being here tonight. We've got work to do. Find a campaign, get behind it, go knock on some doors, make some phone calls, talk to people. Let's win this thing. We'll see you next month.